All right, everyone, let's talk about how to communicate. So, communicating with another person, you have to be willing to invest in the conversation if you want the relationship to last. So, you should always want any relationship that you're trying to cultivate to last as long as you want it to. Do not invest into a relationship that you do not want to continue. If it's small talk, that's fine. That's a different kind of communication. That's a different kind of relationship. But if you want to build trust, if you want to build a connection, a bridge between yourself and another person, be willing to listen and listen a lot. If you're willing to listen, you're willing to not only hear what they're saying, but to truly understand where they're coming from by paying attention to what they're saying, by working with that person on what they're trying to communicate to you, by asking questions based on what they say, then that is truly investing in a person. Now, it's not to manipulate them. It's not to use it against them. It's to allow yourself to understand who they truly are so that you can meet them on their own grounds, on their own perspective of themselves. Even if that perspective is incorrect, it's very important, very good if you want a relationship to last, to meet them on their own terms. As an individual, sometimes we want to share things. Sometimes we have to share things just to get it off our chest. The only way to have a certain relationship to where you can truly communicate with somebody else when you need to really communicate, when you need to explain to them, is to develop a relationship where the start of it was you listening to that person, understanding that person. It isn't always easy to figure out exactly who we should collaborate with, who we should have a relationship with, friendship or romance or whatever. But it all starts with listening. That is the first step. Listening, actually listening to a person. And, even if you don't agree with somebody, even if you have very alternative views to the views of somebody you're communicating with, it's actually productive to understand their terms on their own terms, their beliefs on their own terms, and themselves on their own terms. Because we understand ourselves in a very particular way. Somebody relating to themselves or somebody understanding themselves is its own inner language. We want to learn that inner language that they only share with themselves so that we can better communicate. Not for nefarious purposes, not to use that against them, but to allow ourselves to truly understand a person. It's sometimes hard, but also sometimes easy to detect a predatory person. Somebody who listens, but tries to put forth an argument or an idea or a perspective that chisels away at our highest ideals. So if we're communicating with somebody about, I guess we can talk about spirituality, how I believe this or that, and they say, there's a big difference between this and disagreement, which I will talk about in a second, but somebody might say if they're being predatory, it seems like you rely upon this a lot. Why do you feel like that this is such a big part of yourself? Couldn't you be somebody else? That's a predatory sign. Now, questioning somebody on what they believe, who they are, what have you, would be, what brought you to that? What brought you to the realization that this is a part of yourself? How did you become this way? So it's a difference between how and assertion. When somebody tries to assert on what you are while they're asking the question, compared to truly asking the question, not asserting anything, is a difference, and it's a big difference. Human beings do not understand each other very well. We have a lot of ways to communicate with one another, but we do not understand each other very well at all, because most people don't care to understand one another. It's easier to become somebody who is so stringent and founded in their own identity that they will rebut any other identity or fight against any other identity than it is to have two people who meet each other on equal terms. Okay, you have that idea, I have this idea, let's talk. That is fairly uncommon, unfortunately. Now, I'm not going to say it's uncommon to the extent that everybody's just fighting. I'm not saying that. But the connection is being vulnerable. You must be vulnerable once you realize that that person has been vulnerable, or that they're willing to meet you in that vulnerability, to where they're going to tell you the deepest parts of themselves. And when they do that, you have to give something back. It's very important that you do so, because that will create a wonderful bond. If somebody says, I'm not really sure about why I do this or that, or why I believe this or that, you might say, it's very similar for me in this or that regard. I do things sometimes that I'm not really sure as to why I do that, or I believe these things as per blind faith. So you want to be vulnerable a little bit, at least when somebody else is coming to you for vulnerability. At any rate, it's very important to be an individual who becomes the communication rather than projects the communication. You want that link. You don't want an asserted argument, an asserted presence, an assertive conversation, unless you're trying to overpower somebody. What you truly want is a realization that in the moment we can be one. At any rate, thank you very much for listening. I hope this was interesting. Thank you very much for watching as well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns regarding communication or deeper communication, feel free to shoot them down in the comment section below, or find me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Hunter_Salazar, HUNTER SALAZAR. At any rate, thank you very much for listening. Hope all of you have a wonderful day.